Okay, good morning, everyone. This is John Haller with our Israel update. Today I have Or Issachar with me. He is the head of research for the Israeli Defense and Security Forum. And if somebody could just in the comments maybe give me a heads up or something to make sure that I'm coming through, since there's a time delay on these podcasts. So Or, welcome to our Israel update today. It looks like we're going. So,
John, good to be here.
Okay, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about who you are and your background and what you're currently doing?
Right, so I'm thrilled to be here. I'm currently serve as the VP of Research and Content for Israel's Defense and Security Forum, also known as IDSF Bitchonistim. And I come from a mixed background of both, security studies, high-tech, military service, and actually music. So originally my bachelor degree was in piano performance, musicology. I actually spent quite a bit of time in Ohio. That's why I was excited to come on. Spent some dear days in both Columbus, Ohio, Miami University, Ohio State University, and in Cleveland back in the Malt Center. He gave a concert of Israeli composers. So that was thrilling. People could not be warmer. And, I just missed those days.
Well, everybody here in Ohio is excited about Ohio State possibly winning the National Football Championship on this coming Monday.
Well, it's lucky for you. I don't know the first thing about sports, but that's I believe you when you say it.
It's a very big deal around here. So it's sort of up there with the Olympics and that type of thing locally. So, and I'll have some contact information in the show description, people, if you want to follow Or on various, social media and at the IDSF. And I would highly recommend. One of the reasons why I reached out to Or was because, as you know, I've done some work in the past with the IDSF and interviewed a number of their people. Danny Seaman, who used to be with them, is a pretty much a regular on this update. And so I support wholly what IDSF is doing. And there'll be information where you can follow them. And they do a daily update at 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday, most weeks. And I would highly recommend that you get that. And one of the reasons why I picked this up was because Or was on the IDSF Zoom call last week talking about various issues, including Turkey. So today what we're going to do is, I think the first thing we're going to do, and I'll put a link in the show notes again to this, Or wrote an article that came out Sunday on the Jerusalem Post website. And the title of it is Trump's Golden Opportunity to Checkmate Iran and Stabilize the Middle East. It was an opinion piece. And so I want to talk to you about that and how you view that in light of what's going on with the hostage negotiations and the potential Gaza ceasefire that everybody's been talking about here, everywhere. I mean, it's just all over the media here and you can't get away from it. And then I do want to talk a little bit about Turkey. So, and by the way, you don't have to answer anything that you don't want to answer. And if you need to go, you tell me you need to go and we'll wrap it up. Okay.
We're good to go. Happy to be with you.
Well, so let's talk about this article, because everybody's been talking about Trump coming in and what's that going to mean and what's going to happen. Is Israel going to do anything before? What do we think the Biden administration is going to do on the way out? So just give us your take on the current state of the Israel-Iran situation and where you see that going.
Right. So last year on October 7th, we actually experienced the largest attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And that was propped up by an Iranian proxy, Hamas. We tend to forget that in many times the discussion surrounds Hamas or Hezbollah. But these are just the puddles, We're going around the Middle East and trying to drain the puddles, while the main tap is the Iranian regime in Tehran. Iran itself is funding these terrorist groups, of arming them. In fact, a Hamas delegation was training in military facilities in Iran just 3 weeks before the massacre, and we got $360 million transferred from Iran to Gaza every single year. So clearly, the Iranians are heavily involved in all that. It's really the canary in the coal mine of the Middle East, and I think that's really the actor that's generating the most instability in the Middle East. So that's really the key. If Trump is coming into office next week, and one of these key policy agendas, as it seems, except all of your domestic issues, and they're plentiful. I know, John, you guys want to first fix immigration and the economy and all the rest of it. But foreign policy-wise, Trump, that used to be considered an isolationist, looks not that introspective as it relates to the Middle East, China, Russia, the Panama Canal, Greenland, and what have you. And so Iran, if you seek to stabilize the Middle East and usher in peace and prosperity, Iran is the key. We know that what's currently standing in the way of Israel and the Arab world from normalizing relations is Iran. Over the past few years, we didn't have enough American leadership. I'm going to be honest here. And, when in the Middle East, you sort of go with the stronger side, I would say. You side with a bully in case you don't have enough support. And they saw how Iran is just racing toward a nuclear weapon. And the response you get from Washington was, either ignoring it or trying to go back at all costs, seemingly, to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal that we know was a disaster. And so they didn't get enough support for Washington. And so they sent back their ambassadors to Tehran, and they signed an MOU between Saudi Arabia and Iran with Chinese mediation. Of all people, China jumped into the drain. But now we're in a very alarming situation. And I think if you check the latest Director of National Intelligence report about Iran's nuclear program, you can see how they're literally inches away from nuclear bomb. And to be honest, this really is the number one threat on Israel's security. With the grace of God, we have amazing combatants. We have great spirit. But still, after Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and all the little puddles I mentioned, this is the main tap. And I think the one thing that would end the war, not open a new war, but end this war, is a preemptive military action against Iran's nuclear program. It's not going to take long. The U.S. has B-2, stealth bombers that Israel doesn't have. They recently used it in Yemen, and it doesn't require any boots on the ground. Nothing. What the U.S. needs to show here is that it's determined to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. It's a key American promise from any president, Democrat or Republican, and stabilize the Middle East. This is the cloud currently that's hovering over the heads of Israel and Arab nations. And without that cloud, all doors are, it's going to open the floodgates to Israeli-Saudi normalization and ending the Judeo-Muslim conflict, going to that extent. Alternatives to China's Belt and Road initiatives, bypassing China and going from India through UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel onto Europe. All these train tracks and navigation routes that they're planning to set forth. All these things all these wonderful things are actually just inches away, but they're conditioned upon removing the Iranian threat. This is what's holding us back right now.
So how likely? We've been hearing about the Iranian threat for a while, and it seems to kind of go in and out. And, of course, they operate in underground facilities, so it's a little bit difficult to determine. And Israel's done some amazing things. They got the whole Iranian nuclear archive. I remember that news conference of Prime Minister Netanyahu. I don't know when that was, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. And but how close do you really think they are right now to getting a nuke?
So listening to, for example, Secretary Blinken just the other week, where he said that it's only a matter of decision. From the moment of decision, Iran can develop the first, sufficient fissile material, let's say enriched uranium for the first nuclear bomb within 1 to 2 weeks. And then they currently possess enough enriched uranium for at least 12 nuclear devices. That's the UN, the United States DNI report. Thing is that we are extremely concerned because coming from intelligence, I can tell you that nothing is hermetic. No intelligence. I served in the A200 unit. I can tell you we have amazing intelligence. I know that the United States has amazing intelligence. It's never hermetic. It's never, going blind into a dark room. At the end of the day, you cannot be certain. You have estimates. And so Iran may be seeing right now the Bashar al-Assad regime fell and he fled to Moscow. Assad, as you know, tried to develop nuclear weapons. Israel destroyed it in 2007. Iran sees what happened to Ukraine, having rescinded its own nuclear program. So it says, in order to safeguard my own regime, hell, I'm going to develop nuclear weapons. And nobody's going to attack me. North Korea, remember that? I mean, North Korea signed a deal in the 1990s, just like Iran signed in 2015. And still they got nuclear weapons through stealth, through cheating. And this is really the challenge. So it's not really about opening new wars. It's really about ending the current one, because Iran is currently, propagating terrorism around the region, developing nuclear weapons, vowing. I remember leader Khamenei of Iran openly declaring he wants to destroy Israel. He says annihilating Israel is the just solution and the final solution to the Palestine problem. That's what he said. Now, for Jewish ears, if you hear final solution, you start, itching. That's really an existential matter for us all. But I'll go even one step further. You know how China keeps the Iranian economy on its feet, buying virtually all of Iran's oil after the President Trump reinstated sanctions back in 2018. And Russia buys drones and missiles from it. So they really help it circumvent American sanctions. So weakening Iran is also weakening China and Russia. But I'll go even one step further than that. We know, and that's confirmed by U.S. intelligence reports, that Iran is heavily engaged in South America, Latin America, the 10th parallel, drug trafficking from South America all the way to West Africa and up to Europe, mass migration. And so it's not unthinkable that Hezbollah and Iran, who are very heavily involved, very much in bed with cartels, criminal organizations in South America, is actually enriching itself from trade, like drug trafficking and even trafficking of human beings in Latin America, not unthinkable, even all the way up to the US-Mexico border. So all these things, when you look at the Iranian regime, it's not just far away, it's impacting us right at home.
So when do you think Israel or somebody is going to do something? Because we have change in government coming up here on this in less than a week. But I'm also seeing that this has been. I'm 70 years old, and I've been around for a long time, and I've been able to watch all these presidential transitions. And I will say that this one is unlike anything I've ever seen, because Trump is running around and everybody's treating him like, you're the president already, so we're going to deal with you. But at the same time, Blinken and Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken are running around the Middle East. And I assume Amos Hochstein is also doing so. And so the question is, when do you think something will happen? Then I'm going to ask you, what do you think that's going to look like when it does happen?
It's very simple. I think it's going to happen only when the benefit trumps the cost. And if we were to think about it 2 years ago, let's imagine 2 years ago we wanted to go on a military action in Iran, that would be craziness. That would be lunacy almost, at least very risky. Starting a new war, and Iran built what I call the frontal defense. So all its proxies around the region we all heard of, like Hamas and Hezbollah and Houthis, all these proxies in Iraq and in Syria, all these proxies were designated to prevent Israel and the United States from striking Iran. It was very effective. The moment you dream of ever doing that, you got thousands of missiles raining down on Israeli cities from 360 degrees almost. And what do we have now? We have the frontal defense collapsing, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis almost decimated. You got Syria's Bashar al-Assad, who fled. And so Iran has nothing to defend it. It's completely vulnerable. And so, and according to, if reports are to be believed, Israel strikes in Iran just last October managed to stave off much of its air defense. And so nothing is stopping us right now. Iran is both more dangerous than ever before, inches away from clutching nuclear weapons, but it's much more vulnerable than it's ready to admit. So we will not have another opportunity like this. That's why I called it the golden opportunity, because we got decimated proxies, weakened air defenses, and the entire Arab world and Israel united behind America. Checkmate.
So let me ask you a question, because I'm watching. I spend a lot of time reading Arab and Iranian media and translating it as best as I can. And so over the past week, Iran and their newspapers and through Press TV and some of their other news agencies have released a lot of videos. One video was of a couple generals driving around in a giant underground missile facility.
Yeah.
And I guess my question is, and then there was a report just this morning, some videos that they released about drones, new drones that they have. And they have 1,000 or 1,100 or 1,500 of these drones, and they're unlike anything that we've ever seen. And so my question is, how do we evaluate that, or how would you in Israel in security, how do you evaluate the truth of those videos and determine what's propaganda and what's true? How do you look at that?
So I've been researching Iran for several years now, and I learned Farsi on the way to better read their media. And I got to tell you, leader Khamenei of Iran, as much as he is a major anti-Zionist, he's also his words are fascinating, and I would strongly recommend to learn Farsi just to enjoy all this all this literature, all this beauty. His metaphors are amazing, and so I would be very wary of believing Iranian propaganda. This is in the fog of war. It's very easy to propagate disinformation, and we saw how the RGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, distributed all these videos, let's say for the Zulfaqar missiles, who allegedly can reach all the way to East Europe. Apparently, that was Photoshop, and the underground facilities. Look, it's very much believable, but I don't think the United States, beyond the United States capabilities to tackle that. Reminding you that the Yemenites and even Hamas built underground facilities. All right, so Iran built them right into a mountain and so on. But at the end of the day, it's not unrealistic, and it's not beyond the U.S. capabilities. I will tell you even more than that. The Iranians want us to be afraid. Iran wants us to be afraid, and so it actually made good on its threat to attack Israel directly for the first time in history in last April, and last October. We all ran to the shelter. I remember myself, even in Jerusalem, that never really had any siren alerts, running to the shelter and staying there for well over an hour because Iran decided to launch over 300 ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drones into Israel, drones, just like you mentioned. And virtually all of them were thwarted, intercepted. F-35 jet fighters, Israeli ones, and actually U.S.-based Patriot missiles intercepted those missiles far away from Israeli territory. Some landed in open territory. Some, managed to cause some minor damages. But this just proved us that the Iran's threats, we used to be quite hysterical about them, are not that much of a biting dog. This is a barking dog, I would say. And so it's very much tenable. So I would just advise not to be, not to back up by any Iranian threat. That's what they want us to believe. Iran is still the most dangerous actor in the world today. I haven't heard a single United Nations condemnation to Iran, to be really honest. They're all day busy condemning Israel. I mentioned Iranian leader Khamenei threatening to destroy Israel over and over again. I haven't heard a single UN condemnation of this guy. And trust me, they are quite busy condemning Israel every single day. So this is really what we should be laser focused on. We should, in my opinion, as Israel, we should convey to the president the benefits in doing that. That is to say, to end the current war by removing the Iranian gun off the table.
Okay, so like when I saw videos last week of a new, and I don't think there's any question that Iran is very exposed right now because Israel had taken out the S-300 air defense systems that they had gotten from Russia.
Right.
But now they're sort of acting, they put these videos together, and I can't tell if they're old videos or just they found some good images of rockets, missiles flying around. But last week they had one, and it appeared to be they were claiming that they had a new homegrown air defense system that was a game changer. And again, so do we evaluate that again as potentially Iranian propaganda?
Yeah, we don't have any confirmation of that. I would just say that Iran propagates a lot of misinformation. By the way, they also pride themselves for developing, one of a kind tip of the spear hypersonic missiles. They had a big press conference where President Raisi, now he's gone, pride himself for developing the Fatah missile, able to travel 15 times the speed of light. Not even China has these kind of hypersonic missiles, so they tend to exaggerate. I wouldn't back off. We wouldn't back down just by hearing these threats.
Okay, so in light of all of that, and your article, which I thought was a great piece, that now does appear to be the time, and Trump has been he canceled that ridiculous JCPOA agreement that the Obama administration had entered into. He rolled it back, and I know for the first few days of his administration, he's going to be undoing all the garbage executive orders that the Biden administration has been rolling out over the last few weeks, and will continue up until noon on January 20th. I mean, it's something that you can count on. So I think Trump's going to be distracted for a couple days, but walk us through whether it happens today or in a week or 2 weeks. What do you think an Israeli attack would look like? And I just want to preface that with what we've watched over the past since early September. Well, really, you could go back to when Raisi was killed in a helicopter accident. They took out Hania. They took out some of the heads of Hezbollah. They did the beeper. The beeper attacks took place, which were just absolutely one of the most incredible military intelligence Trojan horse things that when the history of military is written, there's going to be many chapters about the last 3 months. And then they took out the bunker of Nasrallah in Beirut in September. So tell me what you think it's going to look like, how an Israeli attack might unfold based on history or what you, and feel free to speculate a little bit here.
Yeah, well, I would first say that they will write a lot in history about the next 3 months, not just about the last 3 months. And to be honest, we're watching history in the making. As you said, I mean, if you remember, I'm sure you do, any American does, the moment that bin Laden was taken down. For us, the moment Yahya Sinwar in Gaza, the mastermind of the October 7 attacks was eliminated in Gaza, that was really a moment of joy, especially, John, that was in Simchat Torah, in Tabernacles, in Sukkot, the very same holiday as when Hamas really breached the fence to this atrocious massacre. So, and of course, Nasrallah's bunker was bombarded by Israel. I'm sure many Lebanese, by the way, were thrilled learning about this. We saw videos of Syrian rebels, rejoicing in Syria because, as you know, Nasrallah and his cronies are responsible for multiple Syrian deaths as part of the civil war there, and all these things. So Israel is showing strength, and it's actually showing it's methodically collapsing this Iranian domino: Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and now the stage is set for Iran itself. And this is really the moment to checkmate Iran with not just an Israeli strike, but a strike led by the United States. Be a limited preemptive strike. I would assume that the United States will have to use some of its bunker busters that Israel may or may not have. And to be honest, this is really an issue with coordination between Israel and the United States. I'm sure Trump will have to have some low-hanging fruit victories. If you want to imagine him tackling China or Russia, that would be much more complicated than going and tackling Iran head-on. And I just got to tell you, this limited aerial campaign, not boots on the ground, just aerial campaign that will take, I would assume, several hours, will take the Iranian gun off the table. That would just open the floodgates for peace in the Middle East. And to be honest, it will also bring the Palestinians, bring them off the ledge. We know that they enjoy Iranian support and they enjoy coming into the negotiation table. I remember Israeli officials telling me how the Palestinians demand everything from the Jordan Valley to Jerusalem and the right of return and all these wonderful things. Without Iranian support, they would not be able to claim so much. And to be honest, without Arab support as well, we saw how Arab leaders, kind of minding their own business in the past few years. They sort of, I would say, introspective, right? And they want to safeguard their own interests, not the Palestinians, their own interests. I heard one Saudi official saying that with all the money we spent on them, they could have floored Palestine with gold. Where's the money, right? The money's gone. They threw over $50 billion in the Palestinians in the past 30 years. With all this money, they could have turned Ramallah and Gaza into Singapore, and they didn't. And so, obviously, it's going somewhere. And we wrote several reports on the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and the clandestine and kind of underground ways, under the radar ways they are treating their money. One of those ways is, of course, paying terrorists, as you know, John, $400 million per year of paying, rewarding terrorists who murder Jews. That's why you guys passed the Taylor Force Act in 2018, really freezing all funds to the PA until they stop this funding of pay for slay, of payments to terrorists. So what I'm getting at is that this is really a game changer. It's not just a military strike to open a new war. It's a military strike to close this war. It's a low-hanging fruit to checkmate Iran and to really usher in a new era in the Middle East. And I suspect the Arab world wants it even more bad, even more than we do. That's clear to me.
Let me ask you a question. So I watched with, following this for a long time, there's a constant chorus, refrain of people saying, well, Nasrallah, you can't get Nasrallah. He's deep in a bunker. He's deep in a bunker. And then Israel just went in with what, I don't know if it was 43 tons or 85,000 pounds of bombs and just dropped them on the same place. And although he didn't die from the explosions, he died from the lack of oxygen, I believe, that took place.
Which basically, obtains the same result.
So I have a question. So if the U.S. would be willing to let Israel or the U.S. using some of these Moab, the mother of all bombs, bunker busters, these huge, I don't know whether they are 5,000 pound bombs or whatever. They've used a couple in Afghanistan. Do you think that they could just drop a series of those in one spot? For example, I was watching the video of the underground missile facility, and there's missile after missile after missile. But I'm thinking, like, if you could hit that in the right spot and blow it up, the whole thing would go. It would look like them blowing up the tunnels in Gaza or southern Lebanon. Do you think that that's a possibility of the way to do it?
Absolutely, it's realistic, and I wouldn't discredit that option. Obviously, the U.S. and Israel have intelligence; they know where these facilities are and what it needs to eliminate them, just like they knew where Nasrallah was and where Yahya Sinwar was. And so, all these things just indicate that there's a spirit of kind of depression, I would say, and discouragement. I distinctly remember that just in the years in the aftermath of the October 7 massacre, where we're all like counting the dead, they all told us how we shouldn't go into Gaza because that's just impossible. It's just impossible to destroy Hamas and conquer Gaza. And what about all the hostages? And this is really different from the spirit of the people of Israel. My combatant friends who are there and say we're writing history. It's history in the making. I think where we differ, let's say where the Muslim world and the Western world differ is that the Western world is led by, compromised-based people, while the Muslim world is led by faith-based people. That's very different. And so you and I were people of faith, and we know that there are things that cannot be looked at from a legal standpoint or an international law standpoint. We just know they're true deep in our hearts. We just know they're true. Like Iran is the greatest evil on the face of the earth. We must eliminate their nuclear program so they don't eliminate us. You don't go as in the United States has nuclear weapons, so why shouldn't Iran have? I heard this argument before. Or Palestinians want their own country. It's unfair. Well, I'm sorry, but Israel is not going to give you a whole territory, sovereign territory from which you're going to instigate the next October 7. We're going to have to act there to carry out counterterrorism operations and arrest terrorists until such time the Palestinians simply rescind the armed struggle. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So all these things just indicate that when you have faith, it's pretty easy. And I saw people surrounding President Trump. There are people of faith. I saw how Mike Huckabee and Mark Rubio and all these people are simply amazing. J.D. Vance, the way they talk about Iran, some Israeli politicians or leaders should I guess learn from these people. And so what I'm getting at is that we got told a lot of things were impossible. Nobody imagined. I'll just give an example about Hezbollah. They said that there were no. Now remember the titles of the newspapers. Though not Israel will be, there will be power cuts for 72 hours. There would be missiles raining down on Israeli cities, destroying entire neighborhoods. And none of that happened because Israeli ingenuity managed to carry out that beeper operation that really staved off thousands of Hezbollah militants and then just eliminated so many of their targets and so on. These things are possible. I'm guessing that many would tell you it's impossible because they don't want to get dragged in other wars, because they don't want to get bogged down and so on. But here we are. The way to get out of this mess is to get the Iranian threat off the table, not vice versa.
So Trump has always expressed a preference for sanctions. He loves sanctions, big, beautiful sanctions, I think you would call them. Do you think that we're at the point where there's time to do another round of sanctions on Iran, or do we just need to really go for the jugular? And I don't remember who it was. I watch a lot of security type videos. It might have been somebody on the IDSF channel, or related people who think like the same way. Said take out their oil terminal facility, and you'll completely shut down their economy. I mean, like 80-90% of their oil goes through one facility in the Persian Gulf. Do you think sanctions, economic sanctions alone, are enough at this point, or do you think more needs to be done?
No, it's insufficient. I would tell you that we already instated very heavy, crippling sanctions on Iran before the Iranians found 1,000 ways to circumvent them, including today. There is U.S. sanctions on Iran right now on their oil facilities and everything, and they found ways to circumvent them by selling them off to Chinese companies and Russian companies who buy virtually all of their oil. India, who is not cooperating with U.S. sanctions. And what are you going to do? Sanction Chinese and Indian companies? Not very likely. And so there's a whole host of considerations here. I think it has to do with the fact that we're trying to find some sort of a pleasant or neutral way, without all this mud and getting, dirty in the mud and so on, to tackle the Iranian threat. I remember President Obama saying that we managed to shut down Iran's nuclear program without firing a single shot. Well, you didn't shut down the Iranian nuclear program. Iran took out these centrifuges and put them in the basement, and when it chose the right time, it reinstalled them and threatened the world. There's really a gun on the table, and so I'm very pessimistic about the way sanctions can work like magic. They promised us, remember, sanctions will cripple the Russian economy. They'll prevent it from ever invading Ukraine. Well, that didn't happen, and so sometimes, I hear President Trump talking about not ruling out military action against what have you, Greenland, Panama Canal, and so on. In the end, yeah, this is the last resort. But since Iran already opened the gates of hell on the Middle East, there is a serious and imminent threat to the world peace, to Israel's existence, to the United States forces around the region. It will give wind and sail in the wind of Iran to keep trying to carry out terrorist attacks around Europe and the United States. I'm reminding you, they're part of the plot to assassinate President Trump. They're part of the plot to try to assassinate the Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C., or former Vice President Pence in Paris. Terrorist attacks in Denmark and France and Bulgaria and so on. And of course, in the United States itself. So there is really no magic solution here. At some point, the last thing I want to do is regime change in Iran. Okay, that's not something I would be happy if they had another regime, but this is not really the goal here. Having another 20 years like in Iraq and Afghanistan, not at all. The goal is to deny them the capability. That's going to be fast, painful, furious, but that's going to be over within a few hours. And finally, we can, instead of dealing with the Iranian threat for 4 years, these 4 hours, let's say, will save us the next 4 years to do a lot of good things in the Middle East.
Okay. Actually, I think the story that I saw about the drones for Iran was that Iran is now saying they're going to send drones to the Kurds in northeast Syria. So now let's talk a little bit about Syria. What's happened there, and who do you think is behind it, and what should we make of it in terms of Israel's security?
Well, that was just astonishing. There was a civil war going on there since 2011 for over 13 years. And Bashar al-Assad is considered to be, the unruly dictator of Syria, has just fled within days. Those 10 days that finished a war of 10 years. And so the only explanation really that I can find is one that Hezbollah was incredibly weakened by Israel. It can no longer help Assad. 2, Iran has been weakened. And 3, Russia has been weakened by its very... bogging down in the war in Ukraine. But then something else happened, and its name is Erdogan, of Turkey. And Turkey actually very wisely recognized this opportunity here to invade. They didn't do it with Turkish forces. They did it with their little proxy HDS, as you know, on Julani. It's pretty well known that, here we go on the map, that HDS is funded and armed by Turkey. And Turkey was indeed one of the first actors to ever offer Julani, reopening the embassy in Damascus and so on. So really, the danger here, fine, Assad is gone. What does it mean for us? Well, the danger here is that Turkey will try really to expand its sphere of influence, and we're going to end up right on Israel's doorstep. Not Iranian forces, but Turkish forces, or pro-Turkish forces. And we know how Erdogan is comparing Netanyahu now to Hitler and Mussolini. Even, kind of trying to imagine, or at least toying with the option of invading Israel or invading Gaza. He said it just the other day. He's known to have funded the IHH flotilla that sailed all the way from Turkey to Gaza, trying to break the military, like the
blockade around Gaza. Yeah,
right, the naval blockade on Gaza, and of course, IDF combatants took over the ship and so on. So what I'm getting at is that there is an attempt here to, I would say, Turkify Syria. And in that sense, Erdogan has taken a page right out of Putin's playbook. He's trying to really take over the Middle East in that regard, back to the good old days of the Ottoman Empire. And I would just say this. I don't know if you know, John, you showed this in the map earlier. Maybe you can show it again. But in northern Syria, there are entire regions occupied by Turkey right now. So Turkey is right now holding, I don't know if you can see it on the map, right there. If you take the cursor right up to the north, right there. So all of these areas are actually larger than Judea and Samaria itself, making Turkey the larger occupier of Arab land anywhere in the world. So what I'm getting at is that while Erdogan is saying how unacceptable it is for Israel to control what he calls Palestine, he himself is illegally occupying large swaths of Syria. While there was never Palestine, there was never there was always what I feel, at least, that's the Holy Land, right? It's Israel's right to go back to Judea and Samaria. But even if you go along with him, how come you explain that at the same time that he's criticizing us, he's occupying large swaths of Syria? So he's really dangerous in my opinion. And I think the United States should be very wary in cooperating with Erdogan at this point.
So I've talked a lot about Erdogan. In fact, I want to put up another screen here because he's been very clear. I want to redo the caliphate. I want to take over, and he's been very clever in biding his time. I mean, the way he sort of redid the secular Turkish military into something that's Islamist like he is. And is there really any distinction between the Islamists who took over Turkey and Erdogan when you strip back, all the different layers that Erdogan tries to put to kind of give himself plausible deniability?
Yeah, well, there isn't much, and Erdogan is an Islamist. I mean, he's openly attempting to make Turkey, his relatively secular country from the days of Ataturk, into an Islamic country, and not all the Turkish people is extremely thrilled by this. Let's put it this way. But then he's going on anyway, and then you remember the attempted coup d'état against him by his generals a few years ago. It failed miserably, and Erdogan really consolidated his power. I will just say this: he's not just wanted to Islamify Turkey, and that's for that matter, but it's much closer to home, right here in Jerusalem, where Erdogan is buying property. I don't know if you know, but there are restaurants
over Jerusalem, especially, right?
Exactly. So right on.
Yeah, I put up a graphic I want to talk about in just a minute, but
yeah.
So I mean, he's occupying a huge portion of the island of Cyprus in the Mediterranean. I mean, they've completely decimated part of the island's economy, which was heavily tourist based. So let's assume that Iran is dealt with. How do you deal with the Turkish threat now? Because it seems like, or every time I talk to somebody like Danny Seaman or somebody, we start talking about 5 fronts, then we talked about 7, then we've talked about 9 and 10, and now a couple of them have been closed off, and it seems like a couple others have opened up. Because I was thinking about this. I did an interview with somebody in early December, by the end of the week, Syria had been taken over. And I think Putin at his annual news conference said that HTS took over Aleppo with 350 fighters, which is this is just shocking to me that it went so quickly. And then we talked last week. I talked to the same guy last week, and then all of a sudden, LA's, big chunks of LA are burning down, and it seems that things go so quickly. So I want to ask you about this, because on January 1st, Erdogan's son led a demonstration on a bridge in Istanbul, and the Turkish translation was a sun rises, and you can see that the graphic is very illustrative. You have the Turkish flag and the Palestinian flag rising like a sun, but then there's the phrase at the top: yesterday Hagia Sophia, today Umayyad, Damascus, tomorrow Al-Aqsa. And so, one, do you think this really represents the Turkish government mindset, the Erdogan mindset? And then what can we glean from, say, a graphic like this? What should we be looking for?
Oh, full stop. That fully represents what Erdogan thinks, and he wants to reinstate the good old days of the Ottoman Empire. That's an astonishing graphic. And if you look at other publications by the AKP, Erdogan's party, you can see how they also say Jerusalem is ours, and they they're actually proud of it. And Erdogan is not just putting out graphics; he's also doing things on the ground. I remember, we have entire video series. Probably should do them in English too, on the Turkish takeover of Jerusalem. Buying property. In one case, they promised the Arab landlord that who's struggling, wanted to sell his business. He said, "Well, here's a loan from us. Our only condition is that you reopen in 2 months and serve as a khan for Turkish tourists." And that's exactly what he did. And so there's Turkish property all around the old city of Jerusalem in a way that's never seen before. The act of through, clandestine NGOs, charity, right? Mirathna and all these charities who simply give, in Arabic they say zakat, charity. They give warm dishes to families in need, and they encourage tourism. Erdogan himself said, "Why the hell do we have only 20,000 tourists every year to Jerusalem? It's nothing. We need to occupy Jerusalem by the foot." And so the Turkish government actually is buying plane tickets for Turkish tourists. In fact, while we were shooting that video, a Turkish group was passing by and I said, "Like, are you from Turkey? Yeah, where do you get the tickets?" So the government bought it for us. So this is astonishing, and this is exactly what he wants to do. He's dreaming of Jerusalem. Just last week, to be honest, the audience was shouting at him, like, all the way to Al-Aqsa, all the way to Jerusalem. He
Chief,
sort of smiled.
I think they were saying, "Chief, take us to Jerusalem."
Exactly. So then he smiled and said something along the lines of, only with patience will grow more powerful. So he's patient. So
victory comes to the patient. And then, by the way, one of his coalition partners in a speech shortly after that said that, sort of in line with this graphic that I have up on the screen, that if Damascus has fallen, that means that the fall of Jerusalem is imminent. One of his main coalition partners. So
absolutely.
It's and sometimes we want to just pass it off. Oh, that's just campaign rhetoric or that type of thing. But then we see his fingerprints all over Al-Jilani in Syria. So what do you see happening in the near term, or a few months down the road with Syria, Al-Jilani, Turkey, the Kurds? What do you think is going to unfold there? Because I know Israel's always had a special relationship with the Kurds,
right?
And now it seems like Iran's trying to get in on that relationship, at least if I understand the news reports of the last day or two. So what do you think?
Well, I'll tell what I hope will happen.
Okay.
If we're smart, we're going to take advantage of our great relationship with the Kurds to actually encourage the United States to recognize a Kurdish state, weakening Turkey, weakening Iran, weakening Jilani. They're great partners. The problem is they're quite divided, segmented in between themselves. It's a different matter. My own grandparents come from Iranian Kurdistan, so it's kind of hitting close to home. But then what I hope would happen is that the United States will regain its leadership role in the Middle East and around the world. I'll be very honest, we need American leadership. Okay, we're good on our own, but sometimes you really need a friend. And I know how strongly President Trump and his team feel about Israel. It's not just about us. It's about, I think, the Judeo-Christian struggle against the forces of evil. And I think Iran in that represents the forces of evil. Really, what I hope would happen is that we get the brains to recognize the key to stability in the Middle East. We had so many fallen soldiers, so many victims of terrorism, and this really march of death is propped up by Iran, by its cronies. And it's time to first drain the swamp of money, to be honest, not just by enacting sanctions, but actually, shutting down, choking the Iranian economy. Second, to really eliminate the Iranian nuclear facilities. Again, a preemptive, very limited military action. And three, that would actually open the floodgates to normalization between Israel and the Arab world. It will also make, I wouldn't say peace, but arrangement with the Palestinians much, much more likely. Without Iranian support, you don't have Lebanon on fire, you don't have Syria on fire, you don't have, the borders of Israel on fire. So it's really close to home for us. It's not just this faraway country. And we don't want to imagine what would happen if Iran gets equipped with nuclear weapons. That means it can be much more aggressive, much more threatening, much more emboldened to carry out terrorist attacks around the world, including in the United States. And all its drug trafficking and mass migration activity around Latin America, all these things will be much more emboldened if Iran gets nuclear weapons. It will be part of a very, very exclusive club of countries. Only 9 countries reportedly have nuclear weapons. So we don't want this mess, and we need order in the house. Okay, and I think the one key to do that lies in Iran. That's how you bring closer the Arab world to Israel. I think that's how you stabilize the Middle East.
Okay, and so let's just, I want to respect your time, so I just have a couple things, and we'll have to continue this another time because you've been very informative and helpful. Where do you see, so all these things, I mean, I watch Carolyn Glick and other people, and everybody's talking about the Iranian threat. The Iranians are, I think the term I saw used the other day was barbarians. We have to defeat them. You have to defeat them and humiliate them. We have to do the same thing with Hamas and Gaza. And then in light of all of that, we hear this constant call, give the Palestinians a state and everything will be okay. And
Sure.
where do you, and we know that, Trump, well, not Trump, but they were talking about expanding the Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia. Do you think that that's on the table? And how do you think this is going to go with the demands for I would say, not a 2-state solution, but a 3 or 4-state solution, giving the Palestinians yet another state? What do you think is going to happen in that regard in the near term?
Well, solution is a big word. I would use arrangement. Arriving to some sort of an arrangement through making Israel much more powerful. And this is not just slogans. I mean, Israel signed the Oslo Accords in the days of the Clinton administration because it was weak, because Rabin did not believe in the ability of the young Israeli generation to fight. That's incredibly offensive to all my brothers and sisters right now in uniform who are fighting in Gaza and in Lebanon and around Judea and Samaria, who are ready to fight, or actually we lost just 5 soldiers just yesterday in Bet Hanun in Gaza. You got amazing bravery. And so, in my opinion, look, I was just a little story. I was just driving my car yesterday through the roads of Judea and Samaria and around it. And I saw the separation barrier, that encircles some of the Palestinian cities. And they keep telling us how we just build a tall barrier and everything will be all right. We're here, they are there. That's what they've been telling us. And in order to keep a Jewish majority, we need to separate from the Palestinians. I don't want to make them citizens, but I have no illusions that they will stop trying to destroy Israel. Giving the Palestinians a state is a recipe for Israel's destruction, plain and simple. Because as I was driving my car, I saw this little wall, but then there are hills, mountainous areas, slopes overseeing the road when I was driving, with Palestinian villages, watching right on top of them. A wall can't help in that regard. All right. If you go anywhere from Ptuel to all these areas of the Samaria Mountains, you clearly see the Ben Gurion Airport, Tel Aviv, all the power stations of Israel, Jerusalem, Road number 1, Road 6, all these things. Just imagine if they held these territories. We talk about the Gaza Strip. Gaza is nothing. It's like, I don't know, the size of Manhattan or something. I mean, it's tiny, and it's on the shore, on the sea level. Imagine giving Hamas mountains overseeing the entire Tel Aviv metro. It's craziness. And so, yeah, I think we should, by weakening Iran and bonding with the Arab world, strengthening our alliance with the United States, I think the Palestinians will be much less emboldened to demand. All the previous times we reached accords with them, we were in a weaker position. And so I do not think we should give them a state. I don't think any people has a state, to be really honest. Just ask the Catalonians, the Catalans. And to be honest, we need to not to give the Palestinian citizenship, but to really try to reimagine the conflict. One of these solutions we're talking about, or arrangement, right, is city-states or emirates that would give Palestinians some sort of small autonomies on Jenin, Hebron, Gaza City, Ramallah. So they govern themselves on the civil plane, just like they're doing right now, but then not get statehood and not have this territorial contiguity that really threatens Israel. And this just lies on totally different foundations. I don't want to make historic justice by giving them back territory that they don't deserve. This is a historic land of Israel. Let's not forget. I'm simply trying to find an arrangement in order to not make them Israeli citizens. It would be much more simple if we're talking about the Golan Heights with virtually no Palestinians, right? Imagine no Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. We'd have no problem enacting sovereignty over the entire territory. Because of the people there, we're trying to find creative solutions. There's a whole host of creative solutions around the world. Just ask the Vatican, a small state inside a capital of a country, So there are a lot of precedents in the world. We just need to think about.
Yeah, I think Dr. Mordecai Kadar's done a lot of work on that, on his Emirates for the Judea and Samaria plan. One other question, and then we'll let you go. But what about Jordan? Saw an interview with, who was it? Professor Dan Schultan the other day, and it was Amiat Cohen with Carolyn Glick, and he said we need to start referring to Abdullah as the last king of Jordan. Do you have any comment on that?
It's not unrealistic. I certainly recommend to take a closer look at Jordan and the instability there. I would tell you that Jordan is becoming more and more hostile to Israel in order to satisfy its own people. That 80% of them are Palestinians. So this really is the Palestinian state over there. I remember in the first days after October 7, I remember Queen Rania, who is Abdullah's wife, coming on Christian Amanpour, basically denying October 7, denying how babies were murdered, denying sexual violence against Israeli women, Jewish women. And I don't know what we're doing here. We're supporting a regime that's clearly anti-Israeli. The only reason, to be honest, to keep our, let's say, cold peace relations with Jordan is, of course, our interest in stability, and that's okay. And I want to keep that. My only problem is that in the name of that stability, we are serving the other cheek, and that's a problem. Like, Jordan benefits greatly from Israel. We give them billions of metric cubes of water every single year. We're actually keeping Jordan safe by giving them helicopters and defending them from ISIS at one point. And Jordan is not doing us any favors. The only problem that I have is once they are recognizing an opportunity to bash Israel, like with Gaza and their very violent rhetoric, they don't shy away from it. While allowing, I don't know if you know this, John, but a whole host of Iranian-led smuggling operations of arms into Judea and Samaria, into Jerusalem, into the territories. So through Jordanian territory, you got all this arms smuggling, weapon smuggling into the Palestinian cities. And we managed to catch only some of it. We don't really have a fence along the border. So I want to preserve the stability and peace with Jordan, yeah, but I also recognize that it's a really cold peace. It's interest-based. And then we really need to find a better way to manage these relationships. Even in the eventuality that King Abdullah stays and his son becomes the heir and so on, becomes the next king of Jordan, we really need to ask ourselves tough questions. What do they give us in return to that peace? Do we demand anything from them? Do we ask them, for example, to not to allow all this arms smuggling? Do we allow them? Do we ask them to be part of a coalition against Iran? Do we ask them to stop the vile rhetoric and pro-Hamas rhetoric? All these things are tough questions, and I think honestly, a lot of the concessions Israel is making are not justified. We need to be much better negotiators. Jordan is just one example, but we need to be much better negotiators with the Palestinians, with the Arab world, and I think through that will also make Israel stronger.
So, if the hostage deal, well, what's your understanding of what's on the table right now, and what might happen over the next week?
Yeah, and we're walking a very thin line. Look, I mean, we all want the hostages back, but we also recognize that we cannot stop the war and give Hamas all its wish lists. Okay, it's not going to happen. And so my only concern is that Israel is some sort of, there is like a war fatigue. And to be honest, when I look at our combatants, I don't think there is. But I also don't want to give Hamas all its wish list. And so if Israel uses this pause to turn its eye to Iran, cooperation with the United States, like let's have 40 days pause in Gaza, and let's turn to Iran. That's reasonable, all right? And getting some hostages back. But then it should be only a stage in the fighting. I don't think Israel should end the war here. That should be conditional. There should be understanding between Israel and the United States that in the end of these 40 days, we can continue the war to get the other 60 hostages. I heard President Biden saying yesterday, this deal will free the hostages. The hostages. Well, it's not. It's freeing 34 hostages. We don't know how many are alive or dead. And the other 60 are still in captivity. And so I honestly think that we have much more leverage on Hamas than we think. But I also suggest we learn the details and see what benefit it brings to us and condition it upon resuming the war at the end of these 40 days to totally eliminate Hamas. If you travel the car around Gaza and the Gaza envelope, as we call it, and see how close these kibbutzim, these little townships, to Gaza, you see how frightening it is that thousands of terrorists swarm into the territory to murder and kidnap Israelis. We cannot allow this threat to metastasize and remain in the Gaza Strip. We need to be much more bold, and in my opinion, we should not finish the war until we finish off our enemy.
So you mentioned driving around Israel. I promise I'll finish with this. So I have a lot of friends, myself included.
Driving hours, Don. I'm telling you, too many driving hours.
What's that?
I would say too much traffic in many cases. But, a lot of driving going on.
I told a friend of mine that there's this conspiracy theory or whatever out there that the Jews control the world, and I said they can't because I've driven in Jerusalem traffic. That's proof that you don't control the world. You can't even handle the traffic in Jerusalem. But people want to visit Israel. So what do you think? That is it an okay time to come, and what can people do if they do come?
Absolutely. And I know personally people who came, and I personally accompanied delegations of people who came from the United States, from Europe, to the Gaza envelope. We had great barbecues in these townships while our generals were telling the stories of October 7, even watching the Gaza Strip from these townships, just to illustrate how close it is. But, we travel around Israel, and to be honest, I feel safe in most places. I feel safe because I know we have a great military, and I live in Jerusalem now. Jerusalem has not been quieter for years now. You do run to the shelter, even around Tel Aviv, you do run to the shelter. I'm not saying Israel is safe, period. I'm saying I feel safe compared to anywhere else in the world. And I traveled to Europe and so on. I did not feel safer in Europe than in Israel. I got to be very honest. And so I recommend coming over, seeing things for yourselves, maybe eating shawarma or falafel in Jerusalem. I would recommend that. And just talk to the people. It's fascinating to talk to people and how we can be cynical. I recognize that, but we're real. There's no what you see is what you get. We're not trying to whitewash or paint a rosy picture of reality. And sometimes when you go to the shelter, we wonder, like jokingly, how much the Tel Aviv municipality takes for every 15 minutes we spent in the municipal bomb shelter. So all these things, these are tough times. Many families of their sons or daughters fighting in Gaza or in Lebanon. Some families have lost their loved ones, and they have the relatives hostages in Gaza. So we all want this thing to end, yes, but we also want this thing never to happen again. That's what it's really about. That's the end game of this war, to finally remove the Gaza threat off the table. And that's taking it off the table is conditional upon being resolved, and not to be tempted to go back to a very, very deafening silence. We know that we had silence relatively, and it was broken on October 7th. So recognize the danger, and we know what conditions we need to ensure that it never happens again. I do think that we have nowhere else to go. I think Israel is the insurance policy of the Jewish people, and that's where I live. That's my home, and I honestly think that if we're not tempted to think that we can somehow reinvent reality, to minimize the military and to minimize reserve days and so on, we need to recognize what conditions we need to live here in peace and security. And from that point on, the options are unlimited. So I invite you to come over.
Okay,
that's for
great.
sure.
We'll be trying. I'm going to try to get over there this year once or twice if I can. Or Yssachar, thank you so much. Thanks for the work you do with the IDSF, and a great article in Jerusalem Post. I'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And apologize, I wasn't sure because I saw your name spelled in different ways a couple places, and so I'll modify
Even
that.
Israelis following that. That's fine.
I know. Well, it's always funny because when I say something in Hebrew, it's always like, well, you don't really say it that way. It's always, you always have an out to make me feel like I'm not quite getting it right.
I stopped correcting people. That's okay. But John, you gotta invite me to Ohio too. I haven't been to Ohio for like 5 years, and I promise.
Well, come. You have a plate. You have an open invitation to stay with us. We live 25 miles north of downtown Columbus.
Oh wow!
And yeah, so we're right here, and so come over, and we can go visit your old haunts and places, and there's amazing places to eat in Columbus these days, and hopefully we'll win the National Football Championship, and everybody in town will be happy instead of depressed. So
we're all praying for that. If anyone has grand piano, please just let me know.
Okay,
give us a shout out so I can give you a nice recital too. So
okay. Well, that'll be great. Or thanks so much. I'm going to end the live stream, people. But I want to say goodbye to you on the other side. So just give me a minute. Everybody, like, share, subscribe. I'm going to repost this under the regular videos tab later today. Like, share, subscribe, and we appreciate you all taking the time. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you.